A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a significant policy shift, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Canada plans to formally recognize the State of Palestine during the upcoming 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This landmark decision comes amid escalating violence in Gaza and growing international calls for justice and accountability regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Prime Minister Carney made the declaration on July 30th, emphasizing that Canada's previous hopes for a peaceful two-state solution through direct negotiations have become unrealistic due to ongoing Israeli military operations, civilian casualties, and a political deadlock that has persisted for years. The announcement aligns Canada with a growing number of Western countries, including the United Kingdom and France, which have also signaled their intentions to acknowledge Palestinian statehood. This shift in diplomatic stance reflects a rising frustration with the lack of progress towards a negotiated settlement and widespread concern over the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. Humanitarian reports indicate that over 60,000 Palestinians have lost their lives since the conflict intensified, with large portions of Gaza reduced to rubble. The international community, including the United Nations and various human rights organizations, has condemned the violence and accused Israel of carrying out disproportionate military actions that could be classified as war crimes. In light of these developments, Prime Minister Carney stated that the path to peace cannot rely solely on waiting for negotiations that have consistently failed. He articulated that Canada now views recognition of Palestine as a constructive step aimed at preserving the possibility of a two-state solution, which remains widely supported globally as the most viable resolution to the long-standing conflict. However, Canada's recognition of Palestine comes with certain conditions. The Canadian government has made it clear that this move is contingent upon several key commitments from the Palestinian leadership. Among the most important conditions is the expectation that the Palestinian Authority will implement structural reforms to enhance governance, transparency, and accountability. Additionally, Canada expects President Mahmoud Abbas to ensure that free and fair general elections are held in 2026 to legitimize the political leadership of a future Palestinian state. Furthermore, Canada insists that Hamas, which it designates as a terrorist organization, must not be allowed to participate in the electoral process or any transitional political arrangements. While this condition aligns with the views of several Western nations, some experts argue that excluding significant factions could complicate efforts to build a unified and representative Palestinian government. Canada's announcement is part of a broader trend among Western powers re-evaluating their stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Earlier in July, both the United Kingdom and France declared their intentions to recognize Palestine, signaling a shift in European diplomacy and growing disillusionment with Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank. Despite these diplomatic recognitions, they have largely been symbolic and do not come with immediate policy changes that would compel Israel to halt its military operations or settlement expansions. There remains uncertainty regarding how these recognitions will influence the situation on the ground, especially as Israel continues to expand illegal settlements in the West Bank and enforce a devastating military campaign in Gaza. Nevertheless, coordinated recognitions may increase pressure on Israel to reconsider its current policies, particularly if more countries join the movement and if international institutions take further action. As Western nations move towards supporting Palestinian statehood, the United States continues to oppose such recognition. Washington, Israel's most powerful ally, has dismissed recent declarations by France, the UK, and now Canada as premature and counterproductive. President Donald Trump has publicly criticized France's decision to recognize Palestine, arguing that such moves reward Hamas and undermine efforts to combat terrorism. This stance reflects the broader U.S. policy, which has continued to back Israel politically, militarily, and diplomatically, despite widespread international condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza and mounting allegations that Israel is committing acts that may constitute genocide. In 2024, Canada announced a freeze on new permits for arms exports to Israel due to concerns over human rights violations. However, a recent report by a coalition of Canadian and international advocacy organizations revealed that arms shipments have continued, potentially through loopholes or existing permits. This has intensified pressure on the Carney administration to not only halt future exports, but also cancel all current arms permits and enforce a full two-way arms embargo on the Israeli military. Advocacy groups argue that without genuine enforcement, Canada's recognition of Palestine risks being perceived as a purely symbolic gesture. The National Council of Canadian Muslims, NCCM, welcomed the recognition of Palestine as a meaningful and overdue step in Canadian foreign policy. However, they stressed that recognition alone is insufficient. In their official response, the NCCM urged Canada to adopt a comprehensive and independent foreign policy that transcends symbolic gestures. They called for immediate and practical measures, including a complete arms embargo on Israel, a re-evaluation of the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, humanitarian aid and immigration support for Palestinians fleeing Gaza, and stronger sanctions on the Israeli government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. The NCCM also criticized the ongoing support of the Trump administration for Israel's policies, warning that this could threaten Canada's sovereignty if not resisted. They drew comparisons between U.S. foreign policy pressure and hypothetical scenarios where Canada is treated as a subordinate state under American control. The official announcement of Canada's recognition of Palestine is expected to be made at the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This move will mark a historic moment in Canadian diplomacy and could influence other undecided nations to follow suit. However, the recognition of a Palestinian state raises numerous questions about implementation, the geopolitical impact, and how it will affect Israeli policy or military strategy in Gaza and the West Bank. Without international enforcement mechanisms, these recognitions may remain largely symbolic. Nonetheless, advocates argue that growing international recognition sends a clear message. The global community is increasingly unwilling to tolerate the status quo. For many, it signifies a new chapter in the decades-long quest for justice and self-determination for the Palestinian people. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.